Guys, I was admiring a couple young actors the other day, and I thought to myself, these actors are going to have a lot of Oscar nominations come their way. And then I started kind of digging and I went down a rabbit hole. And it turns out there are so many actors that have never received one single Oscar nomination. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the garage. Gerald here with you, of course. So I'm going to give you my top 10, what I think are the most egregious omissions to date in the 97-year history of the Academy Awards from people that have never received a nomination from the Academy. Now, I'm also working on a video that'll come out at a later date where it's going to be a very similar concept, but it's going to be actors that have never received an Oscar. So they may have been nominated multiple times in most cases, but they've never gotten the actual gold. That video will be coming in the future, so make sure you subscribe. Before we get started on the countdown, I want to run a quick promo for you in relation to the giveaway that we are doing for the custom ANORA poster on canvas. The thing is freaking sweet. Tell you about a quick contest I'm running on this channel. All you have to do is subscribe to my channel and be a public subscriber. The contest is going to run through May 31st, and I will randomly draw one of my public subscribers. Just make sure you comment on this video or any of my videos between now and the end of May that you have subscribed so that I can add your username to the list. We're going to be giving away a canvas poster of the Oscar-winning ANORA, featuring, of course, Mikey Madison. There you see the image. It will be a standard 24 by 36 official movie poster size, stretched onto canvas and ready to hang on your wall or in the strip club that you own. Make sure you subscribe to enter the contest. That's literally all you have to do. Comment on this video or any future videos between now and May 31st, 2025, and I will give away this beautiful canvas poster of ANORA. All right, now let's get into this countdown. Before I give you my top 10, I just want to list 5 honorable mentions real quick of, in some cases, young actors, in other cases, veteran actors that have never received Academy Award nominations. These are the ones that were very close to cracking my top 10, but I'm just going to list them real quick as my honorable mentions. And I'll also give you what I think the #1 movie that they should have been nominated for without a doubt is. Mia Goth, countless roles, but I'm going to say Pearl should have easily gotten her a Best Actress nomination. Christopher Abbott, and the one that I would throw out as his #1 omission is Black Bear from 2020. Also starring Aubrey Plaza. Shockingly, James Spader has never received an Academy Award nomination. I would say the one that he would most stand the chance for me personally to be nominated would be Secretary, also starring Maggie Gyllenhaal from 2002. The late, great Ray Liotta never got an Oscar nom from the Academy. I would obviously throw Goodfellas at the very top of the list that should have received him an Academy Award nomination that year in 1990. And my last honorable mention, which is almost criminal, is Danny Glover. Now, he did receive an honorary Oscar from the Academy, probably because they realized, holy shit, we never nominated this guy. The #1 movie that he absolutely should have been nominated for is 1985's The Color Purple, which was a very illustrious Oscar film that year, receiving multiple nominations, but infamously not winning anything. Even worse, Danny Glover was not in the mix for nominations that year. All right, now getting into the official countdown, I will give you a little more commentary about these as we go through them. I will also put at the bottom of the screen the movies that I think these actors or actresses were in that could have very easily lent to them being nominated for an Academy Award in their respective years. Some of these will be veterans like Danny Glover and Ray Liotta that I just mentioned, and some of these may be newcomers or kind of fresh on the scene, but everything they've done is very high quality, and they just haven't been recognized for whatever reason. And that's where we're going to start, as my number 10 is going to be in the lead actress or supporting actress category, never receiving a nomination, is Elizabeth Olsen. Now, of course, Elizabeth Olsen has rose to fame, and her bank account has probably risen as well because of her involvement as Wanda or the Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the last 5 years or so. And while I am thrilled about that, and she's actually one of my favorite characters in the MCU, but here's some films that I think she could have very easily been nominated for and could also be categorized as snubs in their respective years. His Three Daughters, which was just this past year at the Academy Awards, not receiving any nominations, but more specifically, Elizabeth Olsen was left out for supporting actress, as was her castmate, Natasha Lyonne. Or how about a little film from Taylor Sheridan called Wind River from 2017, where she starred opposite Jeremy Renner in that film. Just a tremendous, taut thriller with some pretty cool dramatic elements as well. But I think the most obvious omission for Miss Olsen would go all the way back to one of her very first feature film roles, which would be back in 2011 in Sean Durkin's Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. In this film, she plays a young lady who gets kind of caught up in a cult. Eventually, she realizes that she is in the wrong place and she should not be there. And it turns into a little bit of a thriller and a little bit of a redemption-seeking film for her character, but multi-layered, and her character goes through a shit ton of stuff in this movie, and she really, really carries her own in that film.
It's complicated.
Oh, well, as complicated as it might be, we can't ignore the fact that her behavior is fucking insane.
My number 9 is going to be Oscar Isaac, turning in sturdy work time and time again as Oscar Isaac, always impressing, regardless of the source material, whether we're talking about one of the biggest franchises in the history of the world, Star Wars, or whether we're talking about a small budget independent film that he really spotlights his performance. I'll throw out a few here that I think could have very easily garnered him an Oscar nomination in their respective years. Annihilation, for starters, the Alex Garland film. Or even more so, in keeping with Alex Garland, what about Ex Machina? Now that's a film that Oscar Isaac is kind of introduced to the world, myself included. Back in 2014, he starred opposite Jessica Chastain in a biopic called A Most Violent Year, another brilliant performance from Isaac. There's other smaller roles like in the Dune films for him, or Drive, Nicholas Winding Refn's crime thriller. But I'm going to say the most egregious snub for Oscar Isaac came when he was the lead in the Coen Brothers film in 2013, Inside Llewyn Davis. Man, this is way before A Complete Unknown with Timothée Chalamet that we just got this past year. This studies a Bob Dylan-like figure and his kind of rise in folk music in that early 1960s era. And Oscar Isaac, along with other tremendous performances like Carey Mulligan, Adam Driver, Justin Timberlake, it is one of the more quiet, beautiful films to come out in the last 15 years or so. And it really underperformed at the Oscars in general, but I definitely think Oscar Isaac should have been in the running for a lead actor nomination that year.
Well, I could say we should talk about this when you're less angry, but that'd be... When would that be?
Fuck you.
Now, some of these, when I say them, you might not even believe that they haven't been nominated for an Oscar. That's how kind of crazy it is. So how about Mr. Ewan McGregor? That's my number 8. Man, a lot of films that he could have been in the running for. They are definitely Oscar-worthy performances. How about Dr. Sleep, which is actually a horror film that probably hurt it, but just a brilliant performance in that film. Beginners, Black Hawk Down, Moulin Rouge, which was a huge Oscars player in its year. Big Fish, the Tim Burton, beautiful father-son dramatic kind of love story also going on in that film. But I think the most egregious of all for Mr. Ewan McGregor is Danny Boyle's film from 1996, Trainspotting. McGregor plays Renton, who is essentially a heroin addict who we're being told the story through his kind of chaotic binges that he goes on and his drug addiction. And it's a very frantic, high-energy film. And the performance matches that. It was really one of the more vulnerable and courageous performances I can remember that went with no recognition. And it's a shame because Ewan McGregor, of some of the movies I just mentioned, of course, has turned in a resume, and then you add all of the franchise stuff, whether you're talking about Star Wars or whatever, to the list. He's turned in some sturdy work that deserves recognition, but never received a nomination.
I appreciate what you're trying to do, I really do, but I just need one more score lately. Just bring me one more hit, please. I need one more fucking hit! You fuck!
Next up at my number 7 is going to be an actress who is going to get nominated. And she's one of the ones I was talking about in my intro where I was watching her and I was like, I actually thought to myself for a second, has she been nominated? But I knew she hadn't because it would have been fairly recent and my memory's not that bad yet. My number 7 is Zendaya. So this is not one where I'm talking about the egregiousness from the Academy in terms of the longevity of their careers. Obviously, she's only been acting for about 7 or 8 years in total, at least in film. But the quality that she's turned in, literally every single movie that she's been in is award worthy. Now, if you want to take out the Spider-Man stuff, because obviously they're not going to nominate superhero movies on a daily basis. But from a realistic standpoint, I'll throw out titles like The Greatest Showman, Malcolm and Marie, the Dune films, of course, 1 or 2, frankly. And I think the most egregious, and if you guys followed me this past award season, you know that I think this, Challengers, which is one of the more egregious snubs in general this season, as it got 0 Oscar nominations, even for things like score or screenplay or editing, nothing. Zendaya could have very easily been in our lead actress discussion this year for Challengers, and she actually was for a while, and then it started to fall off when she started to miss several precursors, but she was easily one of my favorites of the year, and I think she deserves to be mentioned. Now, with that being said, she has a lot of projects on the horizon. In fact, this year, she has a movie coming out featuring Robert Pattinson as her co-star called The Drama. She's obviously going to be in Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, which I think is coming out the year after next. And it was just announced that she's going to be playing Ronnie Spector in a biopic, which, by the way, when I heard that, holy, perfect casting. If you put a split screen of those two next to each other when Ronnie was in her late 20s and Zendaya today, it's uncanny. So she'll get hers. I'm confident. Number 6 is an actor who's been acting for over 40 years in the industry, which is Mr. Kevin Bacon. I tell you what, let me list these few, and then I think I know which one's my most egregious for him not getting a nomination. A Few Good Men, the Rob Reiner film. Mystic River, the Clint Eastwood film, where he plays a cop in that movie, and just, man, so memorable. Apollo 13, Frost Nixon, Flatliners, the original. Murder in the First, which was close to being my most egregious because he gives a lights out performance in that movie. Of course, the Oliver Stone film JFK. Talk about a memorable performance. Supporting actor may have been a stretch as he was only in a few scenes in that movie, but talk about embracing the character and hamming it up for the sake of the project. However, I will say the most egregious for Kevin Bacon in terms of a miss at the Academy is 1996's Sleepers, directed by Barry Levinson. Sleepers is a film with some pretty tough subject matter. Kevin Bacon is the top billed actor in the movie of some pretty powerhouse actors that were about to turn over to become big time celebrities. Names like Brad Pitt, Jason Patric, Minnie Driver, Billy Crudup, and then you had powerhouse actors that were already really in or past their prime like Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman. But this is a great film that kind of doubles as a bit of a legal drama and also a bit of a crime gangster film. So it's got a lot of action, a lot of drama, and it's a very sensitive subject matter that Kevin Bacon carries with beautiful heft in this movie, along with a great supporting cast. And I just don't know why he missed that year at the Academy Awards.
You know, your time here hasn't taught you shit. You're still the same fucking bunch of clowns you were the day you walked in here. Okay, everybody go on back and finish your lunches. There's nothing more to see.
My number 5 is going to be another actor similar to when Zendaya was on my list because he's young, and I think that he's probably going to end up receiving multiple nominations if I had to guess. Hell, he might even get one this year coming up because he's got a few projects, actually one that's already come out that I'll talk about here in a second, and a couple more that are on the calendar that could be Academy friendly, so it could be happening as early as the 2026 Oscars. But my number 5 is Robert Pattinson. I'm going to leave the Twilight films off this list in terms of being Academy friendly, but they are juggernauts and they are pop culture phenomenons that kind of sprung him into the zeitgeist and made him a household name. So there's something to be said for that. I love the decisions that he's made in his career since Twilight, even taking on such an iconic character as Batman in Matt Reeves' franchise. Honestly, that could have gotten him an Academy Award nomination if the Oscars were superhero friendly. However, from a realistic standpoint, I'll throw out movies like The Lighthouse from Robert Eggers, Good Time from the Safdie brothers, a 2011 film with fellow Academy Award winners Christoph Waltz and Reese Witherspoon called Water for Elephants. He was brilliant in that film, and that was shortly after the whole Twilight thing. It was a bit of a transition film for him. Mickey 17, which is currently in theaters. Actually, I think it's going to be coming to streaming shortly after this video airs. But he is phenomenal in that movie, basically playing multiple different versions of himself, almost like a multiple personality. I don't think it's going to garner him an Academy Award nomination, but it is worthy. And if it did, I would be pleased with that. But I will say that the number one role that he's had to date that was Oscar worthy in terms of what they generally nominate would be for a movie called High Life. This is a film, by the way, that also features Mia Goth in a supporting role, and I mentioned her earlier for Pearl, but she could have honestly gotten a supporting nomination for this too. The movie just wasn't big enough and wasn't received on a grand enough scale to get Academy attention, which is also what hurt Pattinson here. But the quality of the performance itself is unrecognizable. He just disappears and becomes this kind of father who is reluctant to carry on this relationship with his daughter in outer space and what that entails. But it's done in such a sci-fi kind of quiet way. And I loved his performance in this film, directed by Claire Denis, who is one of our great current filmmakers as well.
The entire sky converged before our eyes. The sensation, moving backwards, even though we're moving forwards, getting further from what's getting nearer. Sometimes I just can't stand it.
My number 4 is going to be the actor on this list that I think might be, maybe, one of the greatest snubs of all time. Let me go ahead and name him, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that. My number 4 is Delroy Lindo. Now, Delroy Lindo is going to be in a film coming out in a couple months called Sinners. I can't wait to see him on screen again with Michael B. Jordan, and also I think it's a horror movie, so I'm all about it. But listen to some of these titles. Get Shorty, Malcolm X, The Devil's Advocate, Cider House Rules, Congo. But I think the greatest mystery of all, and one of the greatest Oscar snubs of our time, and I'm not kidding, is from 2020's Da 5 Bloods from Spike Lee, and he was snubbed for supporting actor that year. He received multiple nominations on the circuit, including winning that year at award shows like the Gotham Awards and the Critics' Choice Awards. But when it came time for the Academy Award nominations, he was glaringly left off for supporting actor, and he gave such a veteran, old school performance in Da 5 Bloods, borrowing from a lot of his previous roles and his previous characters, and it was almost like a body of work that came out on the screen. And it was a character that was rooted in patriotism, but also had a great bit of cynicism to his character, which really speaks to where our country was kind of headed at the time. Even though this is a period piece during the Vietnam War, it was also modern in that way. And Delroy Lindo had a lot to do with it, along with Spike Lee's vision behind the camera.
I see ghosts. What happens to all of us, man?
So you seen him too?
Yeah.
Dad come to you at night. Storm and Norm comes to me damn near every night. Now he talked to you like he talked to me. Come on. I don't think so. Come on.
So the next two on this list are going to be ones that you're going to hear, and if you don't know Oscar history, you're probably going to be shocked that these two dudes have never received an Academy Award nomination, not even nominated. My number 3, the first of those two, is Richard Gere, another actor who's been at it for over 40 years in the industry and has turned in some of the more blockbuster, money-making films in Hollywood, but also some of the more layered, nuanced characters that we've gotten on screen that could have very easily been loved by the Academy. The films were, but his performances never got nominated. Movies like Pretty Woman, 1984's The Cotton Club from Francis Ford Coppola, another classic. But I think the most egregious has to be the Oscar-winning Best Picture and other multiple Oscar nominations in 2002, and that is Chicago. Every other acting category had somebody represented from Chicago except for lead actor for Richard Gere. They love musicals, they love Chicago, they gave it a ton of nominations. It's just so weird to me, especially with somebody who has such an illustrious, long resume in Hollywood, considered honestly one of the living legends that we have right now, was not nominated for Chicago. Is he going to get a nomination before it's too late? I have to say that he will, but it needs to happen in like the next 5 years, maybe. It needs to happen. So let's pull for Richard Gere. He's done some great films that have definitely deserved recognition from the Academy, but just have not hit so far. My number 2, my runner-up, is Hugh Grant. What are we doing, guys? No Oscar nomination for Hugh. It actually almost happened this past year for Heretic, as he received nominations at multiple precursors leading up to the Academy Awards, and he was probably like number 6 for the lead actor nominees this year. He just missed the Academy lineup. Now, obviously, he's done a ton of romantic comedies and stuff like that, but he's also done stuff that would be, seen as Academy friendly. Things like Sense and Sensibility, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Florence Foster Jenkins with Meryl Streep, who did receive an Academy Award nomination that year, by the way, The Remains of the Day with Anthony Hopkins, About a Boy, Cloud Atlas. All of these would be what I would consider Academy friendly and worthy. But I think the most egregious is the one I already mentioned that he just missed for, and that would be the A24 horror thriller Heretic. Man, he was so close, just a hairline margin of getting in at the Academy Awards because he received nominations at the Golden Globes, at the BAFTAs, but he just barely squeaked and just missed for the Academy Award nominations, and it was such a bummer. That would have been easily one of the ones I would have swapped out to get Hugh Grant his nomination, much like Richard Gere, The Window's Closing. But he is making very, very interesting choices in this kind of final act of his career. So I'm excited to see when it does happen, and I think it will happen for him.
Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Can you imagine thousands of years from now people accepting Jar Jar as a significant religious figure?
Beg your pardon?
Jar Jar. Jar Jar Binks.
Jar Jar, excuse me.
All right, and then my number one is a personal preference for me, but I think there was a stretch that this guy had in the late 90s to early to mid 2000s that was like an unbelievable run that received nothing from the Academy. And it's just, I think I know why, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But my number one is Jim Carrey. Now, he's a comic genius, but there were 4 films that pretty much came back to back to back to back that could have any of which given him an Oscar nomination, if not all of them. The Cable Guy might be a bit of a stretch because that's obviously a comedy directed by Ben Stiller. However, the performance that Jim Carrey gives in that is eerie, it's playful, it's frightening, and it's tragic, because then you had his portrayal of Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon, which perhaps had the most chatter around it at Oscar season for him, because it was such a brilliant portrayal of that iconic comedic character of Andy Kaufman. And that was followed by films The Truman Show, which I thought was a definite, and it didn't happen, the Peter Weir film. And then, of course, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which was also a brilliant performance in 2004, but it was a much quieter, much more like heartbreaking performance that we got from Carrey. Really like nothing we'd ever seen from him to that point, or really since then, to be honest. The Truman Show missing, especially when you see the impact of like reality TV and where we are today with social media and stuff like that. They missed an opportunity there, in my opinion. And then his portrayal of Kaufman in Man on the Moon. I mean, that's a real-life Hollywood story, and they usually gravitate towards that stuff. So I'm kind of confused as to why he didn't get a little more traction during award season based on his performance, where he literally embodied Kaufman to the point where there was a documentary made about it because he didn't break character for like 2 months while they were making the movie, which is kind of crazy. So the commitment, the dedication, and the entertainment factor of Jim Carrey too, what he's given us. And yes, I'm going all the way back to In Living Color and Ace Ventura, which, by the way, is why I think he probably didn't get Academy nominations, because the kind of snobbiness came out and they're like, oh, that's just a comedy actor. You know, he's not worthy of our nominations, which is a shame, because in those 4 films in particular, of which I think the most egregious is Man on the Moon, he was definitely worthy of an Academy Award nomination, and he just didn't get it, and it's a bummer.
You don't have to be sorry, Jerry. You're terrific. You're just the best.
I wouldn't have traded it for anything. To me, this was a shining moment for wrestling.
Me too. And it was a shining moment for behavioral science.
All right, guys, that is it. That was my list of actors that I compiled that I just cannot believe they have not received an Oscar nomination as of yet. A couple of them, it might actually happen as early as this year. So fingers crossed, we'll see. Let me know down below in the comments, what actor can you not believe? What is one of your favorite actors that has just never received an Academy Award nomination that I didn't mention on this video? Because I know there's more, and I just wanted to limit myself to these 15 that I talked about on this video. Let me know down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys out here next time in the garage.